Okay, guys, we are going to discuss a few things in the study guide and also insider trading and short swing trading to finish up chapter 10. There's not as much. Most of the packet is already self-explanatory, and you can memorize most of the rest of the stuff that I'm not going to go over. But I do want to start on page 279 of your study guide. We've skipped the very beginning because most of that stuff is listed in the packet I've already given you, and you can read it on your own. I'm not really giving you much detail there. However, I do want to talk about the difference between the Securities Act of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 in regards to potential test questions and how that reflects insider and short swing trading. So on page 279 of your study guide, it talks about Securities Act of 1933. Now, the Securities Act of 33, the initial one, the first one, really deals with the initial or the first part of a sale in terms of corporations. So if we're talking about the initial public offering or IPO, that is going to fall on the regulation. The initial sale of securities to the public is going to fall under the jurisdiction of the Securities Act of 1933. Anything dealing with the resale or after the initial sale generally falls under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. So when you're given a question on the exam, he says, which of the following be under the jurisdiction of the Act of 33 or the Securities Exchange Act of 34? You would have an idea of what, generally speaking, could occur. If it deals with the initial sale or even maybe the pre-sale, it falls under Securities Act of 33. Anything after the fact of the initial sale likely falls under the Securities Exchange Act of 34. So on page 279 in the middle, you have the Securities Act of 33, regulates the initial sale of securities, and it says the securities must file registration statements with the SEC. This is going to be for bonds, common stock, preferred stock, whatever securities that would fall under securities must file registration statements with the Securities Exchange Commission. Now, on page 279, it has a list of what must be filed with a registration statement. This is a straightforward memorization type question on the exam. You just need to know 2A numbers 1 through, 7 letter, terms of security, audited financial statements and stuff like that. You need to know those 7 for an exam question on what must be filed with the Securities Exchange Commission on the initial sale of a security under the Securities Act of 33. All right, the next thing is, this is where the term red herring comes into play. The initial sale or the pre-sale, the financial disclosure, the disclosure about a potential IPO where the SEC does not offer an assessment of the offer. It just says that there might be certain risks, something's fishy, stop what you're doing. That's where the red herring comes into play. It comes during that Securities Act of 1933. It actually regulates the security themselves. And what is defined as a security is under the Howey test. The Howey test is based upon common law, and it says that there must be an investment of money into a common enterprise with the expectation of profits being generated by someone else's work. So if you do your own work, it doesn't fall under securities. If it's dealing with a business or a mutual fund, that could fall under the common enterprise, but you must invest money. So I think Swim makes an analogy in class or on the video about if you bring a dinner to a potluck, that is not an investment of money, even though that may be a common enterprise, but there's no profits expectation and there's no money being invested, okay? So it would not fall as a security. Now, what he will ask on the test, and he has about 2 or 3 different versions of it, which have maybe 5 or 6, 7 or so different types of multiple choice answers that can be jumbled up. He'll just say, which of the following would or would not be a security under the Securities Act of 33? And if you're figuring out what is and what is not a security, bonds, stocks, preferred common stock, mutual funds would all fall under that because those are investment money into a common enterprise and the expectations of profits being generated by someone else's work. Someone else, i.e. Pepsi or something like that if you buy stock in Pepsi. So what you need to ask yourself is he gives you a list of things and says which is this, which or not is a security. You really need to look at that Howey test on a basis of going through that information, okay? And you might have to use your best judgment in that, but he has about 3 questions that some of them use the same exact multiple choice answers in terms of a different area, or some will have 3 of them, and then 2 of those will be on an exact other question along with 2 other different ones. And then you just got to eliminate which one is or is not in that A and B but not C, C and A but not B type thing. The last thing you need to know on the Securities Act of 33 is whoever makes a misrepresentation, a material misrepresentation. Now, a material misrepresentation is a misrepresentation that affects the value of the stock. So when we get to insider trading, short swing trading, that's going to come back into play as well. But we're talking about the initial misrepresentation. Whoever does that is going to be liable. And that could include, on the top of page 280, underwriters. Those are kind of helping people get the financial capital and stuff like that for the venture. Corporate directors, corporate officer, whoever the sign for the document, the corporate officer that signed for the document. And that's a storyline scenario as well. Any corporate officers or directors would fall into there. Any experts that lend their expertise and sign off on it, so to speak, although it doesn't require a signature, like an accountant, a lawyer, an engineer, a geologist. And there was a little case, the Texas Gulf Sulfur case, where the geologist fibbed on a report. That would be a material misrepresentation. Now, that was after the fact, but just note that, okay? The other thing is violators of the Securities Act could be up to 5 years in prison and or up to a $10,000 fine. Fines and jail times are usually going to be on exam 4 more so than anything, especially with environmental law. But however, you need to know and or, so 5 and or $10,000 fine, 5 years in prison. That could be on line A, line B, and then you got A and B could be both correct. The next thing we have is the Securities Exchange Act of 34 on page 280. This deals with the resale of securities that were previously issued in an IPO or on the primary, the initial market. This would be the selling of stock on a secondary market like NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, any kind of global market you might have. Stock exchanges, stock brokers, stock professionals, all of those people would be the Securities Exchange Act of 34 because they all deal with the resale of these securities. So if he asks you about a question on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange or anything about the buying and selling of stock on a secondary market, publicly traded corporations on a secondary market, the Securities Act of 33, still under the jurisdiction of the SEC, will be in charge of that, okay? When we go with the Securities Exchange Act of 34, we also have a term that's more in the beginning of the study guide, but I get a chance to talk about it now, and that is proxy solicitation. In proxy solicitation, that is just written authorization for someone to give stock, to give the ability to vote their shares to someone else at an annual meeting. So most publicly traded corporations have annual meetings. And anybody who owns shares of stock, and it's common stock, not preferred. Common stock is a voting stock. Anybody who has common stock can go ahead and vote their shares if they want. Now, they don't have to go to the meeting or they don't have to vote if they don't want it. But what if they don't want to go to a meeting? Say the meeting is in Iowa. No one really wants to go to Iowa. Iowa is more like a state of depression rather than just a state. So they don't want to go to Iowa and say they don't want to vote their shares of, say, Pepsi. Everybody owns shares of Pepsi, but they didn't want to go for the Pepsi general meeting every year. They could have someone else vote their shares on their behalf. This is known as proxy solicitation. This falls under the regulation under the Securities Exchange Act of 34 because it's after the initial sale of securities, because now we're voting after the initial sale. In doing so, proxy solicitation can be done by anybody, whether they have stock or they don't have stock. They can still get written authorization. So they could be an agent for someone, just gather up a bunch of shares and vote as a larger block and have much more of a voice. Now, in order for proxy solicitation under the Securities Exchange Act of 34 to be legal and not have any problems, not have any potential penalties or fines or anything like that, the person must be honest and truthful. So if I say I'm going to vote your shares and I'm going to vote for the merger, and you give me authorization to vote for your shares, and then all of a sudden I get a large block and I go against everybody and I vote against the merger, then that would be a violation of the proxy solicitation under Securities Exchange Act of 34. I could be held liable for that decision. The next thing that we have is the 8K, 10K, and 10Q reports would all have to be filed with the SEC. And we already talked about those in video 1, so I don't need to go over those. But all of those 10K, 10Q, 8K reports must be filed with the SEC as a result of the Securities Exchange Act of 34. not the Securities Act of 33. The last thing that we need to talk about in terms of this is insider trading versus short swing trading. And in your packet, on the very last page of those 3 pages that we kind of filled in material, is a little chart on the difference between insider trading and short swing trading. Now, we're going to basically do pages 280, 281, 283, or 282. All those pages we're going to put in a nutshell into that little chart that we have at the very bottom of that 3rd page of all the notes. Now, what is the difference between insider trading and short swing trading, and how does it apply? The first thing is both of them fall under the Securities Exchange Act of 34 after the initial sale. So if you're given a question that says something happened, and he goes, this is Rule 10B-5 of the 33 Act, 10B-5 of the 34 Act, 16B of the 33 Act, 16B of the 34 Act, you can eliminate the acts, the 33 Acts, the Securities Act. It falls under the Securities Exchange Act of 34. So if you don't know if it's insider trading or short swing trading or even maybe both, you know it's going to be the 34 Act at least. So the first thing we have is insider trading. Insider trading is Rule 10B-5 of the Securities Exchange Act of 34. It deals with insider trading. And it's like, who can commit insider trading? That's virtually anyone. Anyone who has information not available to the general public based upon some kind of ability to get to that information can be held liable under insider trading. A janitor could be held liable. And just another employee within the organization, a friend of a worker, any of that stuff, any way you can get access to information that's not available to the general public could make you an insider in regards to insider trading. If you get a tip from someone, tippees are both going to be held responsible under insider trading. Also, on a note, aiders and abettors, those who help before or after the fact in insider trading, trying to hide it that you committed insider trading, would also be guilty under the Insider Trading Sanctions Act of 1984. You might want to note that. That's a little bit about that stuff is on the bottom of page, I think, 281 of your study guide. Now, insider trading is the Rule 10B-5. It applies to any person, not just insiders, that has direct or indirect ability to get to inside information not available to the general public. So if they misappropriate that information, i.e. misuse that information, and it adversely affects the stock price, or they gain an advantage by that, then that is going to be insider trading. Now, this could be an employee, it could be a lawyer, it could be a janitor, a banker, it could be all a bunch of different people, and he has a list on page 281 of who it could be. Anytime you gain information through your relationship with the business, i.e. the publicly traded corporation in this situation, you could be guilty of insider trading. Now, it would not be insider trading if that information is already available to the general public. If it's already available to the general public, it's not a misappropriation of inside information, okay? Now, the profit, it can be money, and more than likely it's going to involve money, but it could also be intangible as well. And if you look on page 281 at the very bottom, it says profit can be tangible, money, or intangible, and it says promise of sexual favors. So if I give you a tip and you use that tip to buy or sell stock and make a profit on it, and that information is not available to the general public, and I did it because I want you to be happy, or I want to try to date you, or you elicit, or you say you'll give me sexual favors for that. I'm getting something intangible for my information that is going to still be insider trading, violation of Rule 10B-5. You financially profited on the information I gave, therefore it's a tangible profit. Rule 10B-5 applies to you as well, okay? We talked about tippers, tippies on page 281. So the next thing we have is, and there's a 5-year statute of limitations on insider trading. Now, the other one we need to talk about is short swing trading. And short swing trading can only be done by certain people within the publicly traded corporation. Once again, it's inside information not available to the general public, but instead of it being anyone, like a janitor or something like that, it's got to be a select group of people, and that is an officer, a director, or a 10% plus shareholder. If you're one of those three, i.e. if he gives you a storyline and you're the CEO, well, then you're an officer, director of the corporation. If he says director within the corporation, and he gives just a name like Sleazy Sam from maybe Last Test, Sleazy Sam is a CEO or is a director within the company. You need to note immediately, not only could they commit insider trading because they are somebody, but they could also commit short swing trading. Now, short swing trading is basically defined as the misappropriation or misuse of inside information, just like insider trading is, but it's for a select group of people in which they buy or sell stock, or sell and buy, depending on how they do it, for a financial profit. Now we're talking money, tangible. In order for short swing trading, and that's Rule 16B of the Securities Exchange Act of 34, to occur, not only do you have to be an officer, director, or 10% plus shareholder, but you must buy and sell that stock, or sell and buy, it could go the other way, and generate a monetary profit within a 6-month period. So if he gives you a storyline and says a CEO buys stock at a certain price, knowing that the price is going to go up significantly in the coming weeks, okay? So that's information is not available to the general public. He buys up a bunch of stock, but he doesn't sell that stock for another 2-3 years. Then it's not going to be short swing trading at all, because he's got to buy and sell that stock and make a profit within a 6-month period. It went over a 6-month period, so it's not short swing trading. But could he be guilty of insider trading? Yes, because there's no real time horizon other than there's a 5-year statute of limitations. There's no time horizon on that. But for the short swing trading, that would have been a buy and sell within a 6-month period. So if he bought that stock in May and then sold it in June for a huge profit, and he's an officer, director, or 10% plus shareholder, then yes, that would be short swing trading. Now, the other storyline that you might have for this short swing trading as well is, what if somebody, a major shareholder, owns 8% of the stock, realizes there's going to be something that's going to be big, buys up enough stock to be at 12%, and then sells that stock within 6 months for a profit? Well, he started out in 8%. Therefore, he was not a 10% plus shareholder at the time it started. So therefore, he is not considered a short swing trader. He could be guilty of insider trading, obviously, because it doesn't have that threshold of 10%, but he would not be a short swing trader. Now, if he was already at 10% and bought another 10 to 15% of stock and made a profit on it within 6 months, yes, he would be guilty of insider trading. But if it's 8% and then moves up, it's not, because he had to be already in that 10%. Because one of the SEC things that they do is they require that all officers and directors be on file with the SEC. Meaning, if you're an officer director, you are listed with the SEC as an insider. Sure. Also, 10% plus shareholders will also have to be listed as insiders as well. So for short swing trading, you've got to really be already on a list with the SEC in terms of what you did. If you already have 10% or more of the voting stock, then yes, you're going to be on file with the SEC as a, quote, insider, and therefore you can commit short swing trading. Now, the other two things that you need to know about short swing trading that are very simple, but are multiple choice answers that you need to know for not to get confused between B and C, or you answer a question real quick and then you miss out on one of these little two things. There is no defense to short swing trading. There's no defense to it if you meet the criteria that we just talked about. Now, if you don't meet the criteria, that obviously would be technically a defense. But if you meet that criteria, there is no defense towards short swing trading, i.e. Rule 16B. The other thing is, all profits generated, because it's going to be monetary profits, all profits or damages go back to the corporation rather than you. So short swing profits would be returned to the corporation if you're found guilty of Rule 16B. All right. Now, the last thing you need to know for the test questions is, if he gives you a scenario on the exam, could you be guilty of 10B-5, 16B, both, or neither? And the answer is, you can do all of those. You can be guilty of 16B, could be guilty of 10B, you could be guilty of both, you could be guilty of neither. If you're guilty of 16B, you're more than likely guilty of 10B-5. And if you think about it, it would apply, 10B-5 would apply as well, because you are someone who had inside information not available to the general public. You made a profit off of it. Since there's no timeline for insider trading, if you were guilty of short swing, you're also guilty of insider trading. So if you find someone guilty of 16B, you might want to look on the multiple choice answers to see also possibly 10B-5 as an option as well. If you're a janitor, you're probably only 10B and not 16B. So you can have one or the other. If you're not, if it doesn't apply because the information is already available to the general public, then neither one of those occurs, and your option is neither. The last thing that we need to talk about in terms of insider trading is a Chiarella case. Now, in that orange packet I gave you is a one-page synopsis of this Chiarella case. It's a case that he talks about in class. Sometimes he skips it, sometimes he doesn't skip it. So if it's not on the video or not on the PowerPoint, you might need to know this because it's in his test bank. And the Chiarella case is about a printer who printed some documents, internal documents, but they were outside the business settings. So basically, they were contracted out to make all these documents for a meeting within the publicly traded corporation. He looked over those documents and realized that he could make a profit on that information. He then made a profit on it, sold it, and was found sued for violation of insider trading laws, Rule 10b-5. Now, the courts found him innocent in this situation. Now, you could argue he probably was guilty, but that's irrelevant. He was found innocent because once that information went out to the printer, they assumed that it went out to the general public. I think Swin kind of disagrees with that whole thing, but nevertheless, the printer was found not guilty of Rule 10b-5 in this insider trading sanctions case. So you need to note that for the test. There's a one-page synopsis in your orange packet on that case if you want to look it over. If he talks about it briefly, that one-page synopsis really helps learn information. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is the questions in the back. These are way too easy of questions. However, there's about 7 or 8 questions out of the 20 that are all about either short swing trading or insider trading, and they're fairly self-explanatory, fairly easy, but nevertheless, there's a lot of them. So insider trading, short swing trading can be a lot. Look at number 1 on page 289. It says short swing profits are set by. That's Rule 16b, and it says the 34 Act, 33 Act. See how I talked about that? Even though we have rules 24 and 59, which don't make any sense, you can have, it could be 10b-5 on the C, and it could be 16b on D. The answer would still be B because it's 34 Act. Securities, right there is an example of securities. You just have to have an investment money into a common enterprise, expectations of profits. Short swing profits on number 4. Short swing profits on number 5. Okay. Number 10 is a good question, by the way. Number 10 is a good question. Number 16 is a good question. CalPERS is, on number 16, CalPERS is the California Public Employees Retirement System. They are a major player in the CII, Council of Institutional Investors, and they believe that there should be more transparency in corporate governance. And they would like, CalPERS would really like to have more external things happen. They would want the board of directors to have more outside directors, meaning not employees of the organization. They would want the board of directors chairman to be an outside person, someone that's not an employee of the of the publicly traded corporation. And they would want audits to be done outside the organization. In reality, most of the board of directors is made up of employees, so they're inside directors. The chairman is actually usually a key employee, maybe a CEO or something like that. So they are also an inside director as well, inside worker. And a lot of audits are done internally where they should be done according to CII and CalPERS externally. And that goes with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act for the most part. Let's see. I think that's about it. All the rest of them are, like I said, fairly self-explanatory. The time period on short swing profits for number 20 is 6 months, once again, that threshold. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, text me. I will send out a group message or text to people if we decide to have a Zoom review. I still have not heard from Zoom. They put me into a beta system, and the beta system has had so many glitches. And getting a hold of them, I think they have more concerns right now, honestly, with larger corporations, group meetings, and/or probably school districts than me. So I understand it. It's just frustrating because I've had a couple of meetings I've scheduled online for them, and they have not shown up for those meetings. But anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. The last thing is some student emailed me or texted me and said, I believe in Labor C. Let me double check it. Labor C, question number 14. I want to double check this. Labor C. Is it question number 14? Labor C, question number 14. Yes. Labor C, question number 14. I put as the answer is D. That is absolutely correct. The answer is D, but the answer is also A as well. Landrum Griffin is the informal name. D is the formal name. So A and D are technically both correct and should be corrected on there. It should be an A and D, which is not an available answer. So D is correct, but A is also correct. I will fix that for future semesters and stuff. If we do have a Zoom meeting, I will go over a few questions I've added, and we may go over the beginning questions or any questions that people have the study guide questions, or my packet-based questions, as well as any other topics and maybe a couple other scenarios that I may find from especially chapter 8 for those in 209. All right, anyway, the last thing I want to talk about is I will probably make this YouTube channel private after this portion. If you're a season pass holder and you've already subscribed, I will probably keep you on that subscription. If you're not a season pass holder, you'll probably be unsubscribed, and then you'll have to get like a code or something. I'll have to privately include you if you buy Packet 4, Exam 4, and the finals and stuff like that. Hopefully by then, I will have everything set up by Zoom, and it won't be on YouTube other than just as a backup if you want to see it after the Zoom live review is over. Once again, any questions, you can email me or you can phone me or text me at 979-777-9755. Good luck.